And good evening. Welcome to Cosmic Blueprints with your host Tony Z and your co-host here, Kate of Gaia. Anyway, Tony and Jose, how are you guys doing? I know we have both you guys on the line here.
Not too bad.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
Oh, it's loud and clear, Jose. Beautiful to have you, my friend.
Thank you so much. How are you?
Oh, really good. Yeah, we're excited about this show because we know we're going to let you take this way outside the box where we like to live.
Absolutely. Jose's been doing some fascinating work. I came across one of your interviews a little while ago, referencing the magic of basically how the elites have managed to confuse the masses, and it was an incredible piece of work. Again, it's going into hermetic principles and all kinds of magical principles and trickery using the subconscious mind and all sorts of things. So I'm sure people are jumping to get hold of this information. So Jose, if you could give us a little bit of background information about yourself, how you came and stumbled onto this information and where it actually led, and a little bit about you, and we can get cracking.
Okay, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And about me, well, I'm just a simple person, a regular person but I'm very curious about everything. And at some point in life, when the theory that you have about how the world works doesn't fit with what is happening around the world, then you can do two things. One is you can simply ignore the inconsistencies and keep going ahead, or you have to revise what you believe. And I'm a very rational person. I've always been a very rational person. I'm an engineer by trade. And I cannot live with a theory of the universe that doesn't match the facts of what's happening around me. So that's what happened to me. And as I was telling you, I'm very rational. So the last thing that I expected ever to end up studying was something like magic, because it's something that I always look down, right? I'm a scientist. I work in neuroscience. 18 years ago, I ended up going to New York City, and I ended up doing research at NYU Medical Center, doing models at the neuroscience department. And one question, or one thing that I always fascinated me, or is the big mysteries in life, and to me the biggest of them all is what is consciousness. So I was obsessed with that, and I took the scientific path.
Yeah, you and everybody else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So
I was going to say you and everybody else, Jose. No, it's beautiful.
Oh yeah, I think that's the biggest question of them all, right? Like why are we here, right? Why are we aware of what happens around us? So because of my curiosity towards this, I decided to go and do research, right? I was like, okay, so you start splitting a brain and looking at the cells, perhaps I'm going to find what consciousness is. So I did that, right? And 4 years later, I saw that every time you open a brain and you go that path, you end up with a pound of flesh, and that's it, right? It disappears in front of you. So it's something that you cannot reduce. So that corresponds roughly, right, like with the year 2000, and then 2001 happened, and many things in my view of the world changed, and as I think many people, right? And I start to question everything, right? And up to that point, I was a computer nerd. I'm still a computer nerd, but I decided that I had to broaden my horizons and see beyond my field of specialization. And I start finding that at the end of the day, everything is connected with everything else, and there is a relationship between everything. So if you want to have a holistic view of the world, which, by the way, we're going to talk about this a little bit, the ancient people had that. They were very good at putting things together and connecting everything. We live in a world where everything is compartmentalized. So we're specializing in small silos, and we know how things work to a very minute detail on that silo, but we don't have a clue on how that affects the rest. And I think that's by design in many ways. So if you want to understand what happens, then you have to start to look at the relationships between everything around you. And then you end up going into very unorthodox ways, because most people don't question these things. So, and a lot of these are paths that very few people travel. So that's in a nutshell how I ended up in these weird topics that we're gonna discuss today.
You know, it's I love listening to people. I learned so much. It was interesting that when you were talking about the brain there, when you said that all you end up with is a pound of flesh, the brain, and immediately I resonated with The Merchant of Venice, a pound of flesh nearest the heart, and then I saw the interconnectivity of the mind and the heart, and that would be the pound of flesh nearest the heart, and the whole story of it was to get that pound of flesh removed. Shylock, I'll get into that in another show, but that was a beautiful trigger. Thank you for that. and absolutely, I think in layman's terms, when you talk about compartmentalization, what we have here is, if you can imagine a deck of cards, and everyone decides to be, say, a specialist of the 2, 4, and 6 of hearts. Another one is the Jack of diamonds, 3 of clubs, and you get all these specialists everywhere, but not one complete deck of cards. And what we have done, and what you're speaking of, is syncretism, is decided to take a look at every single card in the deck instead of trying to be an expert in one form or the other. So yeah, that for me is the biggest nail, and you hit it right on top of the head with a sledgehammer, 9-pounder even.
Thanks. Yeah, and I guess the other thing, right, and you touched to something really, really important there, and is that when we're looking for intelligence and look for consciousness, the biggest error and mistake that we do today is that we go to slice the brain, right? We think that consciousness resides in the brain, but it's a holistic thing, right? Like, we are an embodied mind, but it's all our body. And that's something, and in education you see that, because when you go to school, what they try to do is they try to train your mind to learn things, right? But they stay at the rational point, right? At the mind, at the brain. Intelligence is defined as reason only. And I think one of the big problems that we have today in the world is exactly that we have a big imbalance where everything else is neglected, right, and ridiculized and left out from knowing yourself. So all you have is reason to walk by and to explain everything. But we're more than reason, right? We're emotions. And if you think about it, we in school, nobody ever teaches you about your emotions. It's more in we live in a society, right, where even in the past, I think that has been getting better, but even in the past, right, like, boys don't cry, right, because it's something silly, right? If you're a man, you shouldn't be crying. So recognizing your own emotions is left out from our culture. So it's a culture that is completely detached from emotions. Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's what defines us. We are emotive beings. And you can be as intelligent as you want and as rational as you want, but you can be really unhappy. Mm. And I think that's another big aspect of this, right? So you look around the world today, and I don't even think that is knowledge what is lacking, or is knowledge, but it's not rational knowledge. It's holistic knowledge. We don't know ourselves. We are not in touch with our own beings anymore. And that's breeded by our culture, our education system, gives that, right? Like you never hear out in school. They never ask you how do you feel, why do you feel what you feel, right? They always go to concrete things outside of you. There is never a question about who you are inside of you. So you end up being a ghost, and we live in a society, and this at the end you end up being a number in the society outside of your body, right? You're to completely detached from what you are, from yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
This is actually what we discuss here. It's about the separation of consciousness from self. Because when we're brought into this world, I mean, we use words like birth certificates and corporations and, you know what I mean, and constructs and things like this, and we break all these things down. But you come in from it from another perspective, but you're talking about exactly the same thing that we discussed, which is separation of consciousness. In other words, if you close your mouth, you close your eyes, you just sit there and you think for a second, and that you know, you are connecting with your mentality, your spirituality, yourself. But the second you move a muscle or you move something on your body, you're actually animating that thought that you decided to move your hand, or you decided to pick up a pen and sign a paper, putting your sign of nature on that paper, your signature. And that's the animation of self. So we're trying to do the same thing as you, is separate the two into the two components so we can actually see the difference. And this is why your work's so critical for what we're actually trying to do, because we're all working on the same sort of side. It's all about who are we, why are we here, what are we doing here, and what's it all about.
Absolutely. It's this whole forced intellectualism, and that's another key point that you've brought out so eloquently with regards to being detached from our emotions from a very young age. And yes, we are entrained into a forced indoctrination or a forced intellectualization of things outside of us in construct. And you're right, Jose, no one ever asks, you know, never mind how are you, but who are you? And that to me is the fundamental. When I use myself as an example, you know, everyone had this construct on the outside imagining one thing and being presented with one thing, but no one ever asked me until I actually decided to show who I really was. And the joy in that, and the terror, is that when people finally were shown who I am in Two-Spirit, and like from the inside, see, my perspective never changed. Only the perspective of all those outside of me did. So that construct around me was immediately destroyed. So it was beneficial and very destructive at the same time, but obviously leaning more in the beneficial side. So carry on. This is beautiful.
Right. Well, that's what the Greeks call the personas, right? Which is the face, which basically literally means the mask, and is what you show in society. So the thing is that if you think about it, by definition, observation, which is the main sense that we use to know the world today, observation by definition is superficial, because with observation all you can see is the surface of things. So when you live in a community, right, then what you present to others is the persona, which is this facade that we create, and then people start mistaking us with that, right, with the name that they attach to us, with this set of characteristics that they recognize visually from us, and then that becomes a label, and then we become that label. So it's very interesting. I like to do experiments, for example, like I cut all my hair, I chop all my hair off, right? So I'm bald, and then people look at me and they're like mesmerized. They're in shock, right? Like sometimes they're even disgusted, or they're upset that I cut my hair, right? Or it's very interesting. Or you haven't seen people for years and you see them again, and then obviously people change with years, right? And it's shocking when you see someone that you're used to seeing one way, and they change, because in a way your belief system gets, like, your what you believe gets demolished by the changes in the appearance of someone else, right? So you have to readjust your knowledge in order to come back to. You have a dissonance that you have to reintegrate in your system, right? And because people don't know themselves, then what happens is that our emotions are wild. They're is something that we don't know how to work with, because we never acknowledge them. Then we don't know how to treat them. So we have these wild beasts inside us that we don't know how to treat, and then that is very dangerous in many ways. First is that we become these animals that we go to war because we hate the enemy, right? And we decide to go and kill the neighbor. Or someone else with knowledge of how we work inside and what our emotions are, and what in antiquity were called the gods, right? Someone that knows how to, or the spirits, someone that knows how to manipulate or control these spirits, then ends up controlling you.
It's pure manipulation.
Yeah, because we are not aware of them, because we don't know them. And think about it. Every time you have a conversation with someone about something that is meaningful, it immediately turns out into an emotional conversation, or basically the dialogue stops and it becomes emotional. And all the important things are hidden behind emotions always. So any concept that is important, right? Like if you talk about structures of power or any beliefs that people have on what they believe about the state or their families or patriotism or any of these constructs that we have, they always turn our religion. They always turn out in emotions. So you can never have a constructive conversation with someone or a rational conversation. And I'm convinced today that reason doesn't work. You cannot reason someone into seeing their mistakes or their into not their mistakes, let's say, into seeing another perspective of things, because reason doesn't work, because it degenerates into emotions, because people don't know how to express themselves in any other way.
Oh, extremely valuable point. And that's so true. I mean, trying to reason with someone that's in an emotional state, you're effectively wasting your time. And the only time anyone can become rational or reasonable within their emotions is when they have enough time to calm down and have a look at the perspectives outside of the conversation. And many times, I'm sure we've all been through it, where we've been in situations and got emotional and said things we didn't want to say, and then when we think about it later, that's when ration returns, and that sudden narrow-mindedness of intense passion or whatever the emotion was finally has a chance to settle out and become a wide road again, where you can have a wider perspective of it. And it's true, you cannot reason with someone who's emotional, yet we all try. Yeah.
Absolutely, and it's very frustrating and stressful, right? And but I think that's by design, right? Because you see, the easiest way to see it is religion, right? So a big premise of religion, right, is the fear to question religion. So faith is based on that promise, right? Like you have to believe without questioning, and then it's attached to fear or guilt. And same thing with other things, right? Like if you try to talk about, I don't know, politics with someone, right? Politics is about emotions. It's a passional game, right? It's a game about passions. At the end of the day, the opinions surrounded by passions and by emotions. So are things that are constructed not to be discussed rationally but emotionally. And as soon as you do that, then what you end up is you end up in a closed road, in a dead end, because you close yourself and you retract yourself into your emotions, and you stay there and nothing changes.
It is very, very cleverly designed politics. Kate's very big extremely big on etymology, which is breaking down words. And basically, cutting a long story short, politics, multiple lies. or multiple bloodsuckers, depending on which way you want to look at it. But the whole thing is very cleverly put together, isn't it? I mean, politics is a mass distraction. The political debate is a debate. It's not actually going to get anything done at the end of the day. It's just it's distraction. It's rhetoric. They're going to do what they're going to do anyway. Just the fact that you think that they're trying to argue the point out in the House of Commons is completely and utter rubbish. The fact of the matter is we do not live in a democracy, and this is an entirely constructed, controlled planet down here, and we're all locked into this construct. But these are what you're actually referring to is the magical aspects and the deeper emotional traits that we've all got that have been basically locked down. And that's the point. They want to take us into being mindless drones rather than conscious, emotion, spiritual beings. And that's the point. It's part of the construct. It's part of the locking down. It's incredible how you see these things when you start to look, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think the latest incarnation of this, right, and you can see how the world has transitioned from in many parts, right, especially in the Western world, from a religious world into a secular world. But you see the nature of man, right, our emotions are the same as 3,000 or 5,000 years ago. So what has happened is that the way to express them is what has mutated, right? And the latest incarnation that we have of the same system of control is what we call the state today. So in many ways, the idea of God and religion and the idea of this omnipotent being, right, has been, that we used to call God, has been, those attributes have been moving to the idea of the state today. So now you have all these omnipotent supernatural entity that you cannot define where it is, right? And you have the representative that is, let's say, the president or the king, and this entity is in charge of giving you protection. So it protects you from enemies and from evil, and today it gives you health and it gives you education, and is even the name in Spanish is very interesting because it's called the Madre Patria, which is comes from mother, like the mother church. Remember the Saint Church, the mother. Now it's La Madre, and Patria comes from pater, like from patriotic, right? So it's these attributes of mother and father are projected into this supernatural entity that used to be a church and now has translated into the state, right? And then what you're doing is all your basic and core things that you learned when you were a kid. Now you project that into this idol that you created, right? That is the state now. And then you behave as if you were in the presence of your parents, right? Literally like the Holy Father, right? If even the words give it to you. So the mechanism is very clear, right? And I think it's something that has been developed with trial and error for millennia, right? On an effective way to control the masses.
Oh, and they use it to great effect, And again, let's get into the magic aspect of this. These are all constructs. You'd said earlier in one of your comments there with regards to going off and taking out the enemy. And you see, the only enemies that get created are the constructs that we get indoctrinated with from the day we're born, depending on our culture as well, as to what our fundamental core beliefs are going to be programmed into us. So, excuse me. Yeah, a lot of these things, and you'd also mentioned about the church and the fear and the guilt and what have you, and yeah, it's very difficult for people, especially to lose the emotional side of this, because their whole lives they've been hammered with this notion of hell, and that if you don't believe in God or whatever the situation is, that somehow you're going to end up there. And when you put those into a child's mind, especially, they go very deep. And of course, the child is looking to learn from the elder, the adult, the parent, whatever the case may be. And if the adult's telling them the same thing, that becomes a very ingrained and very difficult to remove emotion, because there is a construct with a huge emotion of fear and guilt attached to it, that if I don't believe in this God, I'm going to, burn forever, and these are very difficult things to get over, and I'm sure, I know I've tried on occasion to have a rational conversation. That's why I don't get rational anymore. Rational conversation with someone that is a religious zealot, be it in, Judaism or Christianity or Muslim or whatever the case may be, because that's exactly what they were raised in, or based on what they were raised in, decided to move into something that resonated even closer to the fear they were indoctrinated with.
Oh, absolutely. Two comments there. One, and it's something that I'm very vigilant all the time, and it's something that is really scary to me, right? When, let's say, you get a religious fundamentalist, right? And it's that they live in this closed loop, right? In this self-referencing system, right? That is closed, where if you're trapped inside, then you're there, and you cannot see the blind spot, right? So you're there forever. And then the Bible is true because the Bible said so, right? For example, or any of it's always a closed circuit. But then every time I'm in the presence of someone like that, the first question that comes to me is, so what are my blind spots? In which closed loops am I that I cannot recognize and see? And to me, that's something that is very worrisome, because today I can have beliefs that I don't are wrong, and I don't recognize them as such. And I look in retrospective, right? In my life, I have many of those that I have discarded, and at the time they felt to be truth enough, right? Or I took them as truth, but with time I learned to see that they were not, and that's something that I'm very vigilant, and is something that is very concerning, right? And I think the other thing, that what you were saying, right? The fear, I think that the biggest fear that you have when you question beliefs, more than the punishment that, let's say, you go to hell if you question things or anything, is the void, the dark void that you have when, imagine that you live your life based on a bunch of beliefs, and you identify with those beliefs all your life, and then because you don't recognize who you really are, then your persona is attached to those things and those beliefs. So when you start questioning them, what you're doing is you're questioning the persona, and then immediately what comes is this void, right? That if you stop those beliefs, then you're gonna disappear, because literally the persona that you created and all these beliefs that make what you believe you are gonna collapse. So, and that's terrifying, until you learn that it's not that bad, right? But the first time that happens is jumping into a dark abyss. Basically, is terrifying if you think about it.
Yeah.
So, and I during my life, right, I've been very relentless when I see people, and I ridiculize them, and I do all these things, right, because I find them absurd. But I have learned with time, right, that it's a scary process, and I think the first thing that you have to have for everybody else is compassion, because it's very scary. Like, if you realize that what your parents taught you all your life, that they were wrong, right? Then immediately that puts in question your relationship with your father and your mother. So you have to see that transcends that your relation is not that, right? It's not a set of beliefs, that you cannot identify yourself with something that is outside of you. But we do it because that's how we've been raised. So we are those personas at the end of the day. That's what we are. And then when you destroy them, you're killing. It's a form of death. And I think that death and rebirth, in every initiation, right? In every magical tradition, you have this idea of the initiation, where you have to die and resurrect. And I think it's exactly that. You have to kill those characters that you wrongly believe that you are, in order to find yourself and to know thyself, right? But it's very scary, because you're playing with death.
Mm. Well, this is it. It's a bit like the old saying, isn't it? You can't you need to empty out the liquid in the glass in order to fill it with more information. So if you learned everything and that's it, you've built your paradigm, you've built your construct, and your glass is full with that knowledge of what you've learned, and you try and put this knowledge into the glass, there's no room. It's just going to overflow. It's never going to be, you're never going to get anywhere because your glass is full. Your information is topped up. You're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're this, you're that. You think you know everything, who you are and what you're about, and you think, you know your name, which in fact isn't even your name, but anyway, the point being, you have to tip out some of the knowledge in order to absorb some new knowledge. And you need to absorb the new knowledge in order to grow. And so it's very threatening and frightening for people to think, hang on, I'm a scientist. I've learned at so-and-so technical college, and they taught me physics and math and chemistry and all these different things, when the reality is that truth is nothing like that. Everything is hermetics, everything is alchemy, everything is connected. It's not separate at all. And, it's the same with us as well. It's just a really massive subject, isn't it? Just incredibly deep. But until you can actually get your mind around it, it's confusing.
Oh, absolutely. So my approach to all this, right, is... So how do you know what is truth and what is not, right? How can you attain certain degree of certainty that what you know is correct or is not?
Mm-hmm.
So when you start doing that, then the first thing that you have to start analyzing, or that not that you have to, the first thing that I found that I have to analyze is my tools for learning and for knowledge, right? And immediately, the first thing that you have to start to look at is language.
Mm-hmm.
Because you see, what we do is, reality is out there, and we sense it, and then we create stories that describe what our senses give us, right? And then we create all these stories and all these concepts and all these constructs that are mental, and then the limits of what we can narrate in those stories are given by the limits of the tool that we have to narrate those stories, which is language. So to me, it's very interesting, because in order to know, the first thing that you have to know is the tool that you have to know. You have to understand what are the limits of your tools in order to know how much you can learn, and where the pitfalls can be. And that's very interesting, because when you start doing that, then you go straight into magic, because magic is the science of manipulation of symbols and concepts at the end of the day. And that's what you do with a spell, is exactly that, right? And we were talking before, right? Like the John, right? It starts at the beginning, it was the Word, and the Word was God, and God was the Word, right? So that's the world we live in as humans, in a community and a society, is the shared objects that we create in our heads, which are the concepts, that is language. So it's very interesting, because we exist, our personas exist, right? Our egos exist because we live in communities. And they are linguistic constructs. There are all these concepts of expectations of what people see on us, and we reflect it, right? And we end up in this reverberation, in this resonance. We end up creating these concepts that we can pass to each other, and that becomes reality. So it's very interesting, because we start confusing the menu with the meal. And that's the whole trick around magic, is that, right? Is that you're confusing the map with the territory. So as soon as you start to give reality to these mental constructs that we create, then you can start creating all these fake mental constructs that do not exist in reality, only in your head, and then you can give them a reality as if they were outside. And then you start going down the list, right? 50% of what we have in our heads doesn't exist outside, right? Like the community. What is a community? A community doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It's a creation, right? Like democracy. What is democracy? It doesn't exist. You cannot point at democracy anywhere in the world. However, in our heads, it exists, right? Like the state. What is the state? The state is a myth. It doesn't exist. What you have is a bunch of people with guns and nice offices and nice ties, right? And then you have a flag, which is very funny. It's a rag on a stick, right? And that's it.
They burn pretty good too. Actually, if you get cold some night, just find a rag on a stick and burn it. They'll burn for a while.
But you see, the beauty is that the people that burn flags are still trapped in the paradigm, because they are still ascribing value. They still take the flag for a flag.
Oh, I just look at it as
heat.
Right now it's like -15. That'd be nice to have a rag to burn right now.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm saying. There's no construct there except heat.
Right. But you see, when you see people in protest, right, like they're protesting and they're burning the flag, well, they believe in the symbol that the flag entails as much as the guy that is on the other side trying to shoot them because they're burning the flag.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a construct.
They're at the same level of consciousness. Because both cannot detach themselves, their emotions, from the object. So what you created is a talisman, and let's start talking to magic, right? So what you did is you're charging with energy, with psychic energy, this object, and then that's what a talisman is, right? Now, the funny thing is that we have all this superstition around these terms. So when you think about the talisman, I don't know, tell me, what is the first image that comes to your head when I say talisman, right? What do you think about?
You think magic, don't you? You think witches and cackling broomsticks and all sorts of other things.
Yeah. Good luck charms and things of that nature, absolutely.
Exactly, and probably I don't know, a good Mickey Mouse dressed as a wizard, right, or something like that. An image like that pops out, right? Like, and it's this thing that you put down, right? Like it's ridicule, you ridicule it. But if you think about it, they're quite real, because let's take the example of the flag. The flag is a talisman, and the way it works, right, is that you're taking an object. And what you're doing is you're bundling around this concept, right? You're imprinting this object with emotions. So when you do the allegiance to the flag, right, in school in the mornings, or they have it and it looks very fancy, right, in cars or in nice big buildings, very impressive, right, and all these things. Then what starts happening is that you start mistaking your emotions with the object. And at the end, they become one and the same.
Entwined.
So what you did is you bundled your emotions to a symbol. And we can't help it. It's like moths attracted to the light, right? Like that's what we are. What we are is we're magical creatures. What we do is we love to create these objects that are concepts, and we live in this world of concepts because that's what mediates our communities, right? And the way we talk around in our communities is by creating these concepts. So, but if you learn how to exploit this, right, you can create diseases of language and conceptual diseases, right? That where you can put parasites that exploit on this, and then they start extracting your energy out of that. Another beautiful example of this is money. If you think about it, what is a $100 bill? It's a piece of paper with ink on it, right, and some wiggles on it. And factually, that's what it is. But in our society, that's the biggest talisman that we have, right? That's everybody walks around the world believing that those things have value.
Yeah.
And even now that I'm talking about it, right? Tomorrow I'm going to go and work and I'm going to exchange my labor for some of these things. And if someone comes and tries to steal them from me, I'm going to do something about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I still believe that we can help it. Even that I know what it is, I can help it. So that shows you the deep trance where we are. So deep. It's incredibly deep. And I don't see a way out of this. Because you see, I know about it. You know about it. Factually, you can, well, after you cross the emotional threshold with someone, right? You can come them to see the truth that a bill, right? A $100 bill is only a piece of paper, right? Like they have to come to their senses at some point and recognize that. But even though, imagine that you could do that with everybody in the world, right? Even at that point, you still have all these emotional attachments to these things. Because since we're kids, we've been hammered with this, right? And it's something very settled, right? Like imagine that you're playing at home and you're like a 5-year-old, right? And all of a sudden you find your dad's wallet on a table, right? And then you get the bills out of the wallet, right? Oh, it's pieces of paper. I'm gonna play with this. Immediately, what you're gonna get is a furious father that comes jumping from the sky, right, and saying, "No, don't touch that! You're gonna break the money, and I'm gonna lose all my job or my work for the last 2 days, whatever." Right? So, and that emotional reaction of your father at that moment, right, where he gave importance to this object, that's the power of the money in your pocket today, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Again, and you're absolutely right. This is about empowering a literal piece of paper, which is debt. And beautiful analogy with showing how a child, in particular, gets taught the emotional bond with a piece of paper, where that talisman has become so magical. Now, in order to break that spell, all it's going to really take is for some people just to stop accepting them as real. And again, we've got to make money as uncool as the dark ones have made it cool. I mean, there's better ways to be doing things than with money, for sure. And we've talked about all the new technologies and what have you in terms of replicators, and now we have 3D printers, so whatever you need, you can basically print it out. And that's where we're getting to. It's going to get to a point where we can pull energy out of the ether, literally replicate whatever we need, food or whatever. It's going to take a major shock to the system, and the sooner the system just collapses, the better, and people will realize that all of a sudden, because money becomes worthless, they didn't die. And I think that's really the emotional attachment people have to money, that without it, they will not survive. And I got to tell you, that's been the story of my life for the last solid year anyway, of literally living hand to mouth in order to stay on the air, and what have you. So I know exactly where you're going. It is a difficult road, but certainly not an impossible one. We just got to break the spell, that's all.
Exactly, and it's a spell. That's the point. As you said, you quite accurately pointed out, it's debt. But the fact that the people don't know it's debt, that's the problem. So again, we come back to the consciousness of the people that are using the money. So we've got to, educate people and say, right, this is what money is, and this is how it works, blah, 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 blah. And that's what we're about on the show, about helping people to understand all of this.
Yeah, one of the things, I'm going to let Jose get going here, I'm loving what you're talking about. One of the things that I have used to bring this whole debt issue to the fore, on occasions when I was in banks with, friends of mine, be it the teller or whatever, and I just look at the teller and say, do you like getting bills in the mail? And they look at me like I've got two heads. No, of course not. Then I'd hold up a $20 bill, and I said, well, you like putting them in your purse. You like putting them in your wallet. And they go, oh, I never thought of that. Yeah, and again, it's stupid little things like that that bring it to, the reality of, yeah, it's debt. And in particular, I loved doing it when I haven't set foot in the bank in a couple of years, but you can see the power of it immediately, and you can see their faces. And when you're walking away, you can feel the energy of the questioning. It's like, oh, I never thought of that. Oh my God! And then you see them turning to the teller next to them and telling them the same story. So again, it's just about planting seeds to break that spell, and we're all doing our part on it. As I've been telling everyone, Jose, that take any bills that you've got and just throw a red box around the signatures, because when you box the signature, it takes it off the document, making it worthless. But again, it's not so much the physical act of doing it, it is the intent of saying, yeah, this is debt, I'm going to destroy it. And, they'll box the signature and pass it along. But what has changed there is a fundamental change of mind, which is what we're after.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me ask you something, right? Because when you put the signature in a box, right, in a red box, then what you're doing is you're recognizing that signature has some meaning on the piece of paper. What I'm saying is, no, it's simply a piece of paper with scribbles on it. So you can put Mickey Mouse face or a happy face or a red square or whatever it is, right? It doesn't matter because it's still a piece of paper. It's like burning the flag, right? As long as you recognize, or you, I think the way to do this is by transcending the remember the medium is the message, right? So I think by acknowledging that there is a signature and that I have to put it in a red box, what I'm doing is I'm recognizing the value of the talisman still.
Again, I totally agree with you. This is a baby step to the point of realizing that what you're saying is that it is just a talisman. What we have to do in the minds to break the spell is to show them first that it's worthless. Give them a real living example of it, something they can physically do to see that it is truly worthless. And then, once that seed is planted, that's when the mind starts to shift into exactly what you're saying, that it is just a talisman. The signatures are absolutely worthless. It's a piece of paper. In the case of Canadian money now, it's a piece of plastic that is meaningless. It's empty. It's someone that can print it out of thin air and use it first and buy up everything and then pass the debt out to everybody else. So I totally agree with you. For me, this is symbolic of a baby step to showing people, first off, telling them, do you like stuffing bills in your purse? Or your wallet, and they kind of click with that, and then you take it up to the next level of saying, well, yeah, it is just a bill, and I'm going to make this bill worthless. This is deconstructing the construct, and then you box a signature or do whatever you think you need to, write void on it. I don't care. Just something where you change.
Can anybody hear my voice?
Yeah, I love mustache on George Washington. That's beautiful.
Yeah, just do something to it to break the symbolism and its value. Ridicule. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you, Tony.
Your line's collapsed. Can you hear me, Jose?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, yours isn't too clever anyway. Is mine clear?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. They've completely cut Kate off at that particular point, so do you want to try and speak again, Kate, see if that's any clearer?
Oh, did you hear what I said, Jose?
No.
Yes, I heard what you said, yeah.
Okay, it must have broke up on your end, Tony. So let's carry the construct to the deconstruct, because you know what they say about truth. First it gets ridiculed, right? And then it's violently opposed, and then it's accepted as a self-evident truth. So what we're doing here is we're going to the ridicule stage. Let's ridicule the symbol for what it is. It's a piece of paper, guys, that you will kill people for. Think about that, okay? And then we move it up into people, they're going to violently oppose the concept because how am I going to survive in this? And that's, I've been through that violent opposition to the point where now you're right, it's a talisman. It is a magic spell, the mono-I, money, God, that has people worshiping it. And there's your real magic. And this is what we need to break. So carry on with what you're saying. You've taken it to the final level. So let's carry on from there.
Gotcha. No, and I got you. I got your intent now. I understand you. Uh, yeah, and then money is very interesting, right? Because what we were talking before about a language, and that the way that you recognize things around you is by doing language, right? And we create these linguistic constructs, and that's what we use. And then in order to analyze things, what you have to do is you have to analyze the tool that you have to analyze, which is language. And one thing that I found that is very useful, and I think you mentioned it a little bit ago, is etymology. You talk about it, right? Hello?
Yeah, Kate does.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've lost your mic mute button there, Kate.
Yeah, I was having trouble with the mute. Yeah, etymology, language, that's one of my main focuses, taking the sounds of the words to a whole new level, splitting them down, looking for the roots, finding out their multiple meanings. Because every word means its equal and opposite once you learn how to break them apart. So they're quite deceptive.
Right. So in the case of money, which is very interesting, it comes from the word moneta. And that was one of the names of the goddess Juno Moneta. And what is interesting, right, is that in the temple of Juno, the coins, the talismans were minted. So the minting was happened at the basement of the temples, and you can see it's beautiful in etymology how the roots of where money comes from are impregnated in the name that we have for money, which is money, right? Because it comes from moneta. So you realize that it is a straight talisman, right? Because the minting of talismans, which was done by the priests on the temple, is what created the first talismans in form of round tokens that were the monedas, as in monetary, and that's where money comes from, the word money. So you can see the root of the word, the provenance of the talismans that we use today, in the name of that we give to it, to that we ascribe to it, which is fascinating. And then the interesting thing is that, because you see today you hear this a lot, right? You hear the Rumpols and the Austrian School of Economics, right, and all these economists saying, no, what we have to do is we have to get rid of paper and we have to have is gold, solid gold, right? So basically what you're doing is you are taking the talisman, right, and the energy that you're focusing on the paper, and you're saying no, now paper is not valuable. Now what is valuable is shiny objects. But it's very tricky, right? Because you're still ascribing the power of the energy, charging the energy in the talisman. You're still doing that with gold or silver or whatever it is that your metal or of choice, or diamonds or whatever you pick, right? Yeah. So it goes basically the object that the target of the energy, or the where you collect the energy of the talisman, is useless, is meaningless. It can be anything. It can be scarce, like a precious metal, or it can be plentiful, like paper. But the act is still magical, which is interesting. And I think that's a point that is interesting, is that we can't help it. We are magical beings. What we do is, and think about this, which is I think it's very poetic, and it's a beautiful idea, is that you can cause hallucinations on somebody else, right? Like, that's the power of language, how magical it is, right? If I say elephant at this moment, right? Boom. What I did is I created an image of an elephant in your head. That to me is beautiful. And if I say pink elephant, right, or polka dot pink purple elephant, boom. I agree. So you see, it's a shamanic thing that we have. It's a beautiful tool, but it can be misused, right? So I find that it's very, very interesting, and And money is one of those things, right? Because at the end of the day, inflation is loss of faith. So as people start, as the spell starts to fade out, right? And as people start to cut that there is a trick, then we have a technical name for that is inflation, right?
Mm.
And it's very interesting. It's a way to measure loss of faith in a quantitative way. Now, the other thing that it has, right, and I think this is one of the most pervasive things of these kind of talismans that are money, is that it forces you to assign a number to everything in the world. Because as soon as you take this as your standard of value, right, and the talisman becomes the medium of exchange in your society, right, and what determines the exchange of goods and services, at that point you're forced to assign a number, an equivalent to everything. And I think that's the most pervasive thing of this, is that you end up creating a society where everything has a value, and you cannot help it. And then what you cannot ascribe a value to, a number, right? So basically this creates a dichotomy, and it's one of the side effects of language and this, is that you create a world where what you're expressing is quantities. And this is related again to reason, right? And being rational. And when you only take that aspect of the mind, then what rational comes from, reason comes from ratio, which is comparison of quantities, right? So a ratio is the comparison between two quantities. But in order for reason, for ratios to exist, everything has to have ascribed a quantity that you can compare against something else. So when you quantify everything, the qualities disappear. And then what you end up having is a world where the things are really valueless and the things are really valuable, right? And I'm using the word in the wrong sense because it's not monetary. It's like the things that transcend value do not exist and disappear, right? So you create a culture of death where everything that is important, like love and consciousness and beauty and life and all these things that you cannot quantify, then they're irrelevant in the monetary system, and then you destroy them. And then a forest becomes how many tons of timber do I have, and ultimately how many dollars, millions of dollars, is the value of that forest, right? Or animals become how many pounds of flesh do we have on these 1,000 cattle. So it's very pervasive because it's a cancer that takes everything, right, and invades everything, and then because everything becomes a quantity at the end of the day, and everything that you cannot quantify, it doesn't exist because it's incompatible with the system, and the system cannot tolerate it, so it simply gets pushed aside and it disappears, right? So if you think about it, it's very, 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 it's a very complicated issue, and I find it fascinating. I find this fascinating, and to tell you the truth, if you try to think to alternatives to that, excuse me? Did you say something?
No, nobody said anything. Keep going.
Okay. So it is so ingrained in our heads, right, that thinking about a world without I have an echo here.
Yeah, it must be on your end. I'm muted out every time, so.
Okay.
Yeah, just if you're working with speakers, just angle your mic back a little bit. Should be fine.
Yeah, it's better now. So we're so ingrained. This is so ingrained in everything that we do, right? Money and the idea of quantities is is so ingrained on everything, and when language and reason become the god that rules everything, then you live in a world where life starts to go away, because you start destroying it, right? Because it becomes something that because you cannot quantify, therefore it must not exist, right? So the spirit doesn't exist because you cannot name it, you cannot point it. And so I don't know, it's something for the people that are listening. Imagine a world without that. How would it be? How would be the alternative to a world where not everything has a quantity, right? And you can see, I guess you can see that in many indigenous communities.
We're finally returning back to that paradigm where people, I think, are starting to have their fill of not having enough time to enjoy their lives, and it really all boils down to the symbols of things like money, and of course the worldwide symbol of a cross, or you name it. These control talismans that have been put before us as idols to worship, and whether people think they're worshiping those idols or not is irrelevant. The fact is, when they grant them power, they are actually granting it magic, as much as looking at a crucifix as an idol and not understanding what it really means, but they have a preconceived notion of it because of what they've been told by someone who doesn't know their arse from a hole in the ground either. So this is what we're dealing with. It's ignorant beings feigning intelligence, teaching other ignorant beings, where they all get together and go, "Aren't we wonderful?" And they clap their hands and they sit around, then they go and have Kool-Aid and play with dolls together.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, that is. I remember a series called Stargate, and there was this one particular planet they went to where everybody worshipped the Ori, and it was an interesting name for something to be worshipped. It was the or I, the Ori. I thought, yeah, it could be anything. It could be you, it could be me, and it was just one of those things that's there in your face, and I thought, yeah, it's pretty obvious when you think about it. What was it? Energy goes where attention flows. Incredible.
Yeah, so we just got to readjust our sights here and decide what are the more important things, and that's what we're doing, especially with these shows, is starting to show people that they are the value, not the things outside of themselves. When people grant their power to someone else, be it through an election, the literal word elect for electrifying election, and they cast a vote or a vote with the silent L. They put an E at the end instead. When they do that, what they've done is they've granted their power to another, and that is a very real, not illusionary power, because this is a mental universe, and when you're dealing with the power of intent, that's where I stay focused. What is your intent? What are you trying to accomplish? And I love how you've broken down the money into the talisman mentality. I never looked at it from that perspective. It's quite beautiful, and thank you for that. Now, when we start drawing that power back into ourselves, and we start taking full responsibility, that's what it boils down to, because people like to give power away outside of themselves because if something goes wrong, it wasn't their fault. Well, I gave my power to so-and-so and they screwed up. It's not my fault. Well, yeah, it is your fault because by omission or commission of the act, you're guilty. If you give your power, it's as simple as saying you have a gun that you will never use and you give it to someone that goes out and shoots somebody and you say, well, it's not my fault. Well, yeah, it is, because they wouldn't have got a gun unless you gave it to them. So, and that's exactly what's happening when we worship things like money or church and these false idols and what have you outside of ourselves. And we don't spend the time to find the true human heart, which is our true source of power. That's our consciousness. And everyone's too busy looking out. They're not spending the time within to understand what empathy and what compassion really are. And when you start thinking in terms of doing unto others that which you'd want done to you in the most literal sense, people will be a whole lot less apt to hurt one another. And that's where the positive flow starts coming, and we've been duped into this negative flow for so very long, and I do feel 100% that mankind has kind of had their fill of it.
Yeah, I hope that's true, right? Because
Well,
mass media, right? We're
I
we're,
call it the meat stick media.
yeah,
Okay.
but it's very effective, right? Like
yeah.
like you see what radio was able to do in the 30s, which ended up in the 40s, right? If that's what radio can do, imagine what television can do. And we haven't seen that yet.
That's it too. And I got to tell people that watch things. Here's a prime example, and Hollywood and the meat stick media will tell you exactly what you're doing. And there's been a real rash of zombie movies and zombie series. What they're trying to tell you people is that you are the Walking Dead. And until you awaken, that's exactly what you are. This whole zombie thing is the media's way, or the elites, or whatever you want to call it, the ones that are controlling the talismans. It's their way of saying, "Look at you, you meat sticks. You're walking dead. You don't even know it." And they're laughing all the way to the fictitious bank, and all during that they're stealing the energy, and people are laughing it up. Bread and circuses. Here we are in Rome all over again. But that paradigm has shifted. I think back a year ago. And to today, and it is so much different. I mean, going on the net, say 5 years ago, you wouldn't have seen, 1%, not even a tenth of 1% of truth sites and people trying to do what we're doing on the internet 5 years ago. But today, I mean, it is everywhere. And it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The consciousness is awakening. And, oh, by the way, Santo says hi. He's doing his last show over on Freedom Range tonight. But I just want to pass that along. I was chatting, Skyping him before the show. So I tried to tell you that, Jose. So Santo Bonacci says hi.
Oh, cool. Cool. So do you want to talk a little bit about conjurations?
Oh, please. Hey, Jose, take it. I want you to feel comfortable on this show because we have taken things so far outside the box, we've never even found the box since. Okay? Feel free to do your thing. We don't even know where the box is anymore.
Okay, good. There is no box.
Exactly. It's your mentality that's a box.
Exactly.
Kind of my point.
We're all on the same page.
Let's talk a little bit about conjuration of supernatural entities. So let's see two things there, right? So the first is, what do you think? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the word supernatural?
For me, that's normal. But for the average individual, supernatural would be like Harry Potterville, ghosts and goblins and all things that you cannot see, other dimensional stuff and whatever.
Right. Exactly. Right. So let's talk a little bit, and I think you know a little bit about these conjurations, but let's start with supernatural, right? So if you look at the etymology of supernatural, it comes from supernaturalis, which is super plus natura, which means above nature. And the definition says, being beyond or exceeding the powers of nature, not occurring through the operation of merely physical laws, but by an agency above and separate from this, right? So basically, the dictionary's definition, the etymology, and the definition of supernatural is something that happens that is not ruled by the laws of nature. That's it, right? Now, let's see how it works in a conjuration, right? So, what is interesting is a conjuration, let me get the definition here, right? A conjure comes from conjurare, which means con is together and jurar, which is to swear. So a conjure is to swear together. And I don't know if you remember in the movies, right? Let's go back to this. When you create a little contract with the devil where you're selling your soul to the devil, then you create this little document, right? Which is supposed to be a contract. And then you sign it and you say, okay, I give you my soul, whatever. That's a conjure, right? You're creating this contract with this entity, and that's a conjure, right? Now, another interesting thing when you're doing conjurations of supernatural entities is the idea of the sigils. So a sigil, right, is a seal, a magical seal, that has the power to evoke the supernatural entity. So you can see Dee, for example, the magician, a famous magician. He used to create all these sigils, right, which when you look at them, right, like they look like hieroglyphics, right, usually encased in circles, where the idea was that they had the power to evoke these supernatural entities. Now, what is interesting is, by definition, right, what you end up having is that you have the power, right, with these sigils to evoke or to bring into your presence the existence of this supernatural entity. Now, one more and last definition, and then I'll give you a punchline, right, which is incorporation, which comes from incorporatio, which is the act of placing in a body or giving material form, incarnation, or embodiment. So, if you look to a contract of incorporation of a corporation, right, what you're doing is you are creating this supernatural entity by this piece of paper. And think about it, like you go and let's say you decide to create a company. So you go and you register your company and you get this piece of paper that is signed, right, that it says, and by the power of the state of whatever it is, then this company is constituted, is incorporated, and is signed by an authority. And then at that point, what you have is this entity that came into existence out of nothing. Now think about it. That's the definition of magic, right? What you're doing is you're bringing into existence out of nothing something, an entity. And that's a corporation. So a corporation is, and now think about this, think about the definition that we gave about supernatural. Supernatural is something that is not ruled by the laws of nature. So which other laws exist out there? Well, the laws of man, right? So what you have is the priest, which is the lawyers, right? The people that create the laws, that can conjure into existence a supernatural entity. And that's what the conjuration of a supernatural entity is. So corporations are these creatures, and they exist, and think about it. They are supernatural in the sense that first, they're ruled by laws that are not the laws of nature, but the different laws, in this case the laws of man. And second, they're not in this dimension, because where is a corporation? It's not in space and time around you, right? You cannot point at a corporation anywhere. It's in a different dimension. It's in the ether. It's in the ethereal realm. It's in your head, right? It's a spirit. And you conjure that through a magical act. And it exists as long as people believe in it. And at the end of the day, everything is reduced, as in magic, to the same thing, right? It's about belief. Just like the talismans, right? So as long as people believe in the existence or the value of money, then money has value. As long as people believe in the existence of the corporation, then the corporation exists. Because people modify their behavior according to their beliefs. So the manifestation of the corporation in 3 dimensions is through the behavior of the people that believe in the corporation. Is that clear?
Oh yeah, very, very clear. I mean, again, we often wonder what the true power of things like corporations are, and they truly are supernatural to the degree that people are believing something that isn't physically real. It is something that is existing only in the mental universe. Yeah, so that makes total sense.
Right, and then look at, there's a lot of internet videos about corporate logos, right? So think about the logo of Starbucks, right? Or pick your favorite food franchise, corporation food franchise, right? Let's say Starbucks. So you look at that, that's the sigil. Immediately when you see it, think about how ingrained that is, right? Like if you're addicted to coffee like I am, every time you see a sigil of the corporation Starbucks, it's affecting your endocrine system directly, right? Because you start, I don't know, I'm talking about Starbucks now, and guess about what I'm thinking now? I'm salivating, because just by the fact of evoking that entity into my head, now I want to drink coffee. So you see the magical power of the sigil, right? Of the logo of Starbucks, of all these corporate logos, because they have, just like the flag, what we talked before, right? Like these talismans, what they have is the power to evoke emotions that are attached to them through repetition. So what you have is all this propaganda, right? Like they bombard you all the time with Starbucks, 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 beautiful, delicious, whatever it is that you want to associate with it. At the end of the day, when you see a symbol, what it's doing is acting in your subconscious, and it's evoking all these emotions. And emotion, by the way, comes from emotion, from movement, right? So it's to evoke movement. So it's to act you to act. It's to push you to act, basically, right? That's an emotion. It's something that makes you act. So what you're doing, right, is you are altering the behavior of people through the evocation of this incantation that you made based on the sigil. And it's incredible, right? Because once you have this realization, you cannot walk around the world, right? And you walk through a street and you're bombarded with all these sigils all the time, right? You're having a magical attack all the time. It's a psychical attack all the time. You have all these forces telling you you should be pushed in this way or in this other way, and it's a constant attack all the time, right?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating, right? Because you cannot maintain your defenses up all the time.
Well,
some of these attacks. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say the beauty of it is when you can understand the pentacles and the all-seeing eyes, and you just mentioned Starbucks there, the Isis figure on Starbucks with the pentacles and the water bearer and all the rest of it. All of these things are all around you, but when you start to see them, you'll suddenly realise that they're everywhere. They're on petrol stations, on logos, they're just everywhere. And there's a good movie called They Live, which basically spells it out, and Kate refers to it often, but yeah, you're totally under a massive bombardment of energies. Even if we talked about this with Mark Passio, even if people don't understand the energies that they're being affected by, that's part of the magic. When you begin to understand what these symbols are and what they mean in their energetic frequencies, then you stand a chance of being able to comprehend the magnitude of what's actually going on. So people should, literally go and look at these things and see if they can see symbology in them, because they will. But just wanted to point that out.
Oh, absolutely. But the trick, right, is that it can be anything, and there are things that are more effective than others, right? So I don't know, red, the frequency of red is something that calls for your attention more than blue, let's say, right? So that's why the stop sign is red, because it's like. But at the end of the day, and this is interesting, when you study chaos magic, what is interesting about chaos magic is that one of the premises of chaos magic is that whatever works, then you should use it, right? So at the end of the day, you can create any absurd association, whatever you want to create, right? You can say through repetition, your brain doesn't discriminate. So you can end up associating whatever you want with whatever else, and then it works. And if you think about it, think about the rituals that we have in our society, right? Like, I don't know, the masses or anything that we like, the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, for example. If you think about it, it's a surreal act, like having a rag on a stick hanging, right, with stars and stripes or whatever it is that you have in the rag, and associate, like chanting something around it, is completely irrational. It comes from a Luis Buñuel movie, right? It could be anything, but as you repeat it and you do it more and more and more, right? And then your peers and your parents and the people that you confer authority for guidance when you're a kid, and you see them that they give that to the same magical act, right? And everybody follows the same ritual. With repetition, they become quite normal. So the idea that we have these people, like in the case of Britain, we have the cast of people that are called the kings, right? The royal people, the king and the queen, and all this. In our society, is something real, and they dress funny, right? And they act different, and people actually believe it. And it's absurd. Look at the way, I don't know, the way people were dressed in the royal wedding last year, right? They're clowns. They're dressed like clowns, right? It's completely absurd. It's surreal, but people take it as something serious and as something that is real, right? And it's real just because it's been repeated again and again and again. But if an alien comes and sees that, it's like he has to start laughing because it's completely absurd. It's arbitrary. So my point, right, in this is that it doesn't. Yes, there are archetypes and things that work better than others, like the color red or the triangles or circles, whatever it is. But it can be anything, and through repetition, and part of the rituals is to accustom you to make this something that is ordinary when it's not, right? And it's usually very absurd. And then you look at ceremonies, and ceremonies are something that. And this is another thing that we have that is interesting, and is education, right? And like we're used to think that education is only sitting in front of a book and doing something, but the real education and the most effective one is when you're completely immersed on what you're learning. So, and think about all these ceremonies, right? You have chants and you have music and you have incense, and then you have the funny clothes and all these things. So what it's doing, right, is imprinting you at all levels. So it's an attack, or not an attack. It's a fully immersive experience where what you're doing is getting you at every level, right? Your emotional level, your sensorial level, your intellectual level. So you're fully immersed in this. And as you repeat it, and this is the catch, right, is that you are, your thoughts, right, your brain, your connections in your head are created through repetition. So when you learn something, what you're creating is you're creating a path in your brain, right, where flows of energy happen more easily. And as you repeat it more and more, you're creating these paths. So when you're learning something, what you're doing is you're transforming yourself. You are your experiences. So since you're a kid, you start to have an experience and you repeat it and repeat it and repeat it again, you're becoming that experience. It's not only that you're learning it, it's that you're becoming it. So the whole thing, right, and the more of your body that you involve in the experience, then the more effective it is, because it gets more ingrained on you.
More affirmation.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, more affirmation.
Yeah, the longer people believe something to be true, and you know, again, it's like that standard propaganda in convincing people by telling them the same lie over and over often enough, that becomes the accepted reality, not the truth, but the accepted reality as being truth. And that is one of the biggest tools that is used against us.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you see, and it's the ritual, right? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, it manifests itself in the subconscious, doesn't it? It becomes, real, big time.
Oh, absolutely, and look at the indoctrination machine that most people have today in their homes, right, in their bedrooms. and they go and eat every night, and then they turn on the magic box, right? And what they get is through repetition every night the same story again and again and again, and the colors and the titillating lights and all these things. And what you're doing is you're conditioning people to think in a certain way. And you're becoming that. That's to me, that's the scariest part. Is not only that you're learning that, but it's physically you're changing inside. You're mutating as these things happen to you.
But most of them don't realise it. This is the problem, isn't it? Because they're so hypnotised by the wizard in the corner of the room.
Oh, absolutely, and you're becoming that, right? So in a sense, that's the, in a way, that's the catch, right? Like at the end of the day, if you think about it, we live, because we're magical beings. We're beings, right? That we live in a society where the foundations of everything we do are magical.
Yeah, I mean, I've told people almost every show, look around you. If you don't believe in magic, have a look around you. I mean, this stuff, you know, I can say it just didn't materialize, but the fact is it did, and we're the ones behind it. So you might want to take your ability as gods a little more seriously and stop giving that power to others that will destroy you with it.
Totally. As I say, time to take back our power, and it is our power. We are the 99%. The controllers are less than the 1%. But they got all the goodies, so the sooner we realise it, sooner we can take it all back. But yeah, Jose, I'm absolutely fascinated, mate. I tell you, I haven't been so quiet in any interview, I don't think. So carry on. It's great. And Luke.
Oh, looks like he's dropped off the board here, so I'll wait for him to get back as soon as he figures it out. Yeah, we've still got a half an hour left, and absolutely, this is one of the reasons why I like I love getting guests like Jose on the panel, because it brings again another perspective, another completely different. I wouldn't say completely different. And it's not even so much unique. It's just a wonderful, 5 or 6 degree turn around yet again to have a look at it from another perspective, and again with Jose's background in science and research, it brings a whole new level of fun to the game too, right? So
absolutely.
I'm not sure where. I'm just going to check our little chat that we have, make sure that he's still showing online here. Yeah, he's showing online, so he might have had just got bumped off the call, and he'll come back in. So
yeah, I've had some issues this end as well, so it's getting a bit funny. But
yeah, I'm not even sure if he's even aware he's off the board right now.
Well, I've just sent him a message and it's not getting through, so I do believe he's been disconnected his end.
Okay, well I'm still seeing him as online here. So hey, listen, I got hacked for about 5 minutes right at the beginning of the show, so I'm used to it though. So I'm always watching the board for that.
Yeah.
But and again, I just want to bring up a couple of key points that Jose was talking about with regards to money being the talisman. And this is exactly what we've been saying with regards to people putting their power outside of themselves, where, you put all that energy into working and you trade them off for, a piece of paper that's supposed to be worth something. If all of a sudden people started turning around going, that's a piece of paper. Have you got something that I actually know is real? And it wouldn't take many to do that.
No.
Just to get people to start at least asking the questions. I was hanging out with my friend Martin today, and we were talking about different communities, a lot of them in the UK, that actually have their own currencies, that work in their own communities. I mean, there's hundreds of them in the UK as far as I know, and there's getting to be more and more across the United States as well. So, yeah. and they'll let that go for as long as it doesn't get too popular, and then of course they'll clamp down on it. I wish I had Martin here. He was talking to me about a situation in the States where a community had actually got to the point back in the 20s. It was a black community where they decided to have their own currency, their own community, and what have you. And they ended up starting building mansions, and it became quite an affluent society because the money wasn't getting pissed away in interest. Oh, there, we got them back. Wasn't being pissed away in interest and stolen by bankers, and the money went right back into the community. And shortly after this success had got to a pinnacle, they went in and created dissension and riots and destroyed the community. And that's standard. Welcome back, Jose.
Thank you. Yeah, my internet connection died for some reason.
Must be the subject.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I can hear you fine. Please carry on from where you were rudely interrupted.
I don't know at what point I died here. What was the last thing? What were you talking about?
We were talking about the new movie with Mickey Mouse and how much you were really looking forward to going to. I'm kidding. No, I don't know. We got talking, Jose, and I'd love to be able to rewind and find out where we were. But let's just say we were still dealing with the constructs, sigils and whatnot.
Yeah,
carry on.
So I think the biggest of these supernatural entities is the state, right? Which was in the Bible was called the Leviathan. And if you think about the constitution of a state, right, created, it's interesting because you have people that get together and say, from now on, we're gonna have this thing that we're gonna call a country, and it's gonna be a state, right? And we're gonna have this imaginary line. And everybody that trespasses that line, we're going to shoot them. And then if I come here, you need a book or with your pick and a stamp to come in. And then what you have is a ceremony, right? Where you end up having this creature created out of nothing, like any other corporation. And that's the state, right? The Leviathan.
And people worship that Leviathan every day, and they'll look at a flag and put their hand on their heart, get all emotional, and go out and kill other people to prove how much they love that fiction.
When they've been fooled into it, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, and that's to me, that's the center of this, right? Is that these supernatural creatures are quite real, right? And they're spookier than the images that we have around us, right? Like, because if you think about the Leviathan, right? Like, and the amount of people that states have killed in the last 1,000 years, or these entities have killed, right, is more than any ghost that you could even imagine, right? Like the wars around the world in the 20th century are more terrifying than any ghost or spook that you could ever imagine.
Absolutely.
So that's the bottom line, right? That at the end of the day, magic is quite real. The thing is that it's not what they have depicted or for us in the movies. But it's something that is quite literal and quite real, and it's everywhere around us all the time.
Exactly. If you've only got the eyes to see it, and that's the point. It's not just about seeing it; it's hearing it, it's reading it, it's it's in the media, it's in the TV, it's in the the radios. It's hypnosis everywhere. It's in football, it's in the sports, it's in the theatre, it's in the movie theatre. It's absolutely everywhere. It's all hypnosis.
Oh, absolutely, and the way it's interesting, right? What we were talking before at the beginning of the conversation, that magic is used to create cocoons around itself, so to hide itself, right? So when you think about people don't study black magic because they find it scary because probably a demon is going to show up if they start studying this or whatever. But it's quite effective, right? Because you are preventing the study of what magic is by implanting fear into people.
Exactly. I'm so glad you said that. This is what it's all about. They demonize things they don't want you to look at. And that prevents you, that puts a physical block. It's like a law or a fiction. Oh, you can't go across there, that's against the law. Whose law? Well, man's law. Well, there you go. It's not God's law, is it? It's man's law. And that, that being able to decode that wall, that physical barrier, is very important. And that's why they create this big scary thing called the devil. And say, oh, you can't go and look at that. It's all devil worship, blah, blah, blah. Keeps you exactly where they want you, which is not exploring the stuff that they're using to manipulate you as a populace. It's very, very effective. Ask any Christian or Muslim.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if you think about it, right, the black magic is based on two things. So the main instrument of black magic is the manipulation of fear, right, and the evocation of fear on people. So, and if you think about it, the state is based on that, right? So all the laws are punitive. So you either do this or there are bad consequences. There's always that. So you always have that side, that everything that the state tells you that you have to do is or else, but they never mention the or else, but everybody knows it, right? So you have to pay taxes or else, you have to wear your seatbelt or else. And everybody knows it. Is fear at the end of the day. Yeah. But there is something else. And I think this is the root of everything, and is the belief in authority. So the idea that there are some people that are better or more special than you are, and that they can tell you what you have to do. And absent this belief in authority, the system wouldn't exist and would collapse tomorrow. Because you see, the people that control the game are few, and they control the masses, which are many, right? So by definition, we outnumber the controllers. But what maintains the system is not force. Yes, they have a trait of force, right? They have the trait of fear that if you don't do, is the ultimate, right? But at the end of the day, compliance, right, is because people truly believe that there are other people that are wiser or better or more smarter or know better or whatever it is, or are gods incarnated or whatever it is, that have the right to tell you what you have to do. So, and that's the point, right? At the end of the day, it's this belief in authority that generates all this, right? Money is valuable because it has the signature, what you were saying before.
Yeah.
Right? But what is that signature? It's a token for authority. So the real engine, right, the dynamo that runs all these is this false belief in something that does not exist, and is authority. Because nobody is a slave of anybody else, right? And slavery exists not because people have guns and can force you to do things, but slavery exists in your mind because you believe it, because you believe that there are others that are better than you, that they have the right to tell you what you have to do.
Exactly.
And that's the bottom line. That's the point. At the end of the day, is that belief.
Yep.
And that's the core. The very core. So as long as that exists, all this thing is going to work and it's going to go around, right?
Well, this is what it is, isn't it? It's mind control. It's meant to govern the mentality.
Absolutely.
And it allows us to keep the walls of the construct in the place.
Yeah, I was just in the chat room there, and we're discussing the concept here of here we have odds of, and I'm being very conservative, where it's 1,000 to 1 in our favor, and what they've done with their ability to work this magic is convinced the thousand that the one is more powerful. And one of the tools, and of course we're all very aware of this, the fear tools that they have is they arm absolute morons, bullies. We talked about this last night, and we talk about it all the time. Here you have the vast majority of police with IQs less than 100, and they're the bullies and the bullied of their particular age groups or whatever, and they're the ones walking around with this feigned sense of power. And as Kyler said last night, I mean, when you're confronted with these cops or whatever you want to call them, you are in very grave danger. And that's the tool that the spellcasters use, because they're not the ones putting their necks out on the line to be spotted or seen. They're more concerned with getting people that are the easiest to make into slaves, and that's the low IQ ones. That's why they go after them, the bullies and the bullies, and they empower them with a certain amount of godness, feeding their egos and what have you. And here's the irony of it, though. When they're done with them, guess who the first ones are to go?
Oh, absolutely.
Very ones that serve.
Soldiers. Nobody cares about the soldiers at the end of the day, right? The controllers don't care about the soldiers.
Well, the soldiers are actually sacrifices. They signed up for it willingly to go to their own sacrificial slaughter, basically. And that's what they need. They need willing sacrifices, people that will be prepared to go and sacrifice everything for their ceremonial rituals.
Absolutely. But one thing, right, is that what I don't want to create in here is enemy images, because that's exactly...
Oh, yeah, exactly. I
this, right?
I agree with you on that. This is not about creating an enemy image. With me, it is merely a statement of the facts, and people need to understand what they're dealing with, and for the most part, they're dealing with even more dumbed down individuals that lack compassion, that lack empathy, because they've never, in their lives probably have never been loved. And there's nothing I have had as a more powerful tool than looking at cops square in the eyes and saying, "I love you." And I watch the shoulders drop, and I watch the head bow, and I feel the entirety of their being relax.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I see that is very effective, right? Like, look, that they never give you their first name. Like, you see Officer X, right? Like Officer whatever is his last name, but they're never addressed by their first name. I think that makes a big difference when I call you Kate, right? I'm touching what is human in you. So I think that's...
They don't like that, and you're absolutely right there as well. And given one of the ordeals I went through, they kept trying to use my last name, and I wouldn't answer to it, because that's a crown name. That's owned by them. That's a claimed bloodline that I gave up, and leave me alone. But you're right. When you're dealing one-on-one with somebody, it's very impersonal to say Mr. or Mrs. So and so. But when you turn around and say Bob or Judy or whatever, mm-hmm. Then it becomes very personal. Now you're touching the heart and the very essence, because that is what they, there's nothing sweeter to anyone than their own name, because it is a cognition and a recognition of their persona. We touched on that in the very outset of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So
or try to reach, try to find, like, do you have kids, right? Oh yes, what are their names? How old are they? When people start talking about personal things, like if you manage to get an officer, in quotes, right, to talk about their kids, at that point you're not talking with the officer anymore. You're talking with the human, or what is left of the human behind the costume and the indoctrination and all that, right? And I think that's what you want to do at the end of the day, right? Like,
very true.
This idea, right, and that's, to me, that's the ultimate question, and what I try to understand is why these people have this urge for control. And the conclusion that I have come to is that control is an expression of fear. So, if you're fearful of something, you want to prevent that happens again. And the way you do that is by trying to create control, by controlling the outcome of what happens around you, right? So, if you think about it, the people that are in fear, from everybody, the people that have the most fear are the controllers. And that's precisely why they want to control.
Exactly.
So when you find someone who is a control freak, right, and these people, the first thing that you have to feel in your heart is compassion. Because you could be them if you had lived the lives that these people lived. And it's nasty. It's a nasty place. Imagine how much fear you have to have in order to want to tell people what they have to do and to control their lives. So to me, that's and to me the solution is at that level. Knowledge is empowering, knowing how things work is empowering, all this, but the solution to these problems that we have today don't come from the head, but from the heart.
Yeah, we've actually covered this point before. I'm glad you've said it because it just reiterates the point. At the end of the day, no matter how people are not going to be happy with the situation, it is that we've got to forgive them for what they've done. Regardless of what you feel about it, you're going to have to put your feelings to one side and deal with it, because that's the only way out of this thing. But yeah, we pointed this out before, but you're absolutely right, Jose. Bang on. A sledgehammer on the head of the nail again. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, guys. I
was going to say, I was going to go back on the one point that you made that I think is very poignant and needs to be addressed. Is when you're talking to an individual that is in a control freak situation, you're standing there in a costume, uniform, whatever you want to call it, and they've got I like to refer to them as 9mm penis extensions on their hip. The minute that you bring to the table the fact that they have kids, and you bring that, the point you made was, you're appealing to what may be the only thing left of their humanity. And really, when it gets to that point where their humanity is so degraded, and I've met a few soulless ones, okay, that are in serious, less than pitiful condition as far as compassion and empathy goes, they have a long way to go. And I guarantee you, with a lot of these beings, and as rough and as tough as I get with them on the air and stuff, that's my way of trying to supercharge the listeners to finally stand up and realize that these guys and girls are just human, and that they're, these are things that we wouldn't do to them, and that's where my passion comes in. And I've had many interactions, unwilling of course, with these entities. And one of the things, I'm very fortunate in my, I've been on stage most of my life, and there's a certain aura that comes out of that. And you carry that with you. It's like you were saying about sigils, it becomes ingrained. And in every situation, there was always a sense of my own empowerment where the entities around me were in fear because they were unsure of how to handle me. And I'm always in a peaceful, and I go at them with logic, and they don't like that too much, but I always make my stance peaceful. And I had one supervisor, I ended up talking with him later, that came to a situation where I was, how dare I pick my girls up from school in my car, go figure. But anyway, I had the supervisor come up to the window, and there was 2 or 3 other cops there or whatever, and he just looked at me, and got to be about 6'3", 6'4", a very daunting fellow. His name was Steve, by the way. I ended up talking with Steve, literally. And I'll give you the quick rundown of the story. We've only got about 8-9 minutes left here, but it only takes a minute for this. And he came up to the window, and I'd been questioning 2 of the officers, one girl, one guy, And he came out to the window and he says, well, it seems like you're being awful defensive. And I just looked at him and smiled and said, defensive? Defensive? Do you want to see defensive? Check this out. I looked him square in the eyes and said, I love you. How's that for defensive? And his shoulders dropped to his knees. I ended up getting out of the car, and of course, had a chat with this guy. As I found out shortly after, it turns out he had worked in the child crimes unit for 12 years in Toronto, and I had, as a child, had been attacked. Let's just say it that way. Let's use the real words: brutally raped for about 9 months. And I looked at him square in the eyes, and I said, he says, it's people like me. I only had to confront what I had to deal with for 9 months, and it's me that tips the hat to you for being able to confront that kind of evil for 12 years. So it's me that thanks you. And it was a different game altogether from that point on. I still had to, they had the tow truck there for the car and everything else, but I ended up getting the car back to the house and what have you, and it all worked out. But I ended up having a chat with this supervisor after everybody else had scattered, because he had parked across the road, and a friend that was taking me home, we stopped alongside his sport utility cop car and had a good chat with him, and found out his name was Steve, and that he'd only been in the Guelph area for a couple of weeks. He'd moved down from Toronto, and he said to me, he said he was absolutely flabbergasted when he, a call came over there. He thought it was, some sort of a bank robbery. There was like 5 cars on the scene, and he was just traveling around. He came over, and it was me and my daughters. And he said, I don't get it. And I said, well, there's going to be a lot of things you're not going to understand, because, Guelph, by the way, in Canada, Guelph, Ontario, next to the RCMP and the Peterborough cops, are the most corrupt in the country. And I've seen that firsthand, the thefts that they've done to people I know and myself, and I'm talking large scale. Anyway, so just to let you know, these are sad entities. They really are sad entities. And again, that's where the pity and compassion, even at the end of the day, even after everything they've done, I can still look at them and go, I feel sorry for you guys. I really do, because, that pendulum's going to come back. And when it comes back, it's going to hit you so hard, and you won't know what to do, because you don't even know who you are yet. And when it comes back, I don't know how many lifetimes it's going to take for you to evolve back into a condition of compassion. So that's my compassion, knowing that they've got a long road in front of them.
Exactly, and I always like to put this information in, because we're talking directly to you guys. You're going to go home and you're going to stick vaccines in your kids that have got nasty stuff in them, unless you wake up to the reality of what you're actually doing as well. You've got fluoride in your water, chemtrails in your air, pesticides in your food, and all the rest of it, and GMOs on its way. You're going to have to suffer with the enforcement of this to all of us. So it's best you guys wake up double quick, please, for all of us.
Yeah, we're all of this together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, yeah, and we got about 4 minutes left here, I think. Let me just check. 3.5 minutes, but I do want to cordially invite you at any time, Jose. These are beautiful talks that people need to hear. And this is the compassionate side of things that I really love to address. And, we can go off on our rants and everything else. The whole idea is to wake people up, and it's not to be, militant or anything like that. It's just snap out of it. But anytime you want to join us, and I'd love to get you in on a show with a panel with Santo. I'm going to try to organize that. I don't know what your schedule's like, but I love when we get eloquent speakers like yourself in from a beautiful perspective that brings a different angle of love into the paradigm and the construct that we're trying to figure out for everybody and tear down the old. So consider that an open door at any point, and we'll talk. But before we wrap up here, you can give out your web information. I want to thank Paul and Critical Mass Radio for giving us this platform every night. I can't be more grateful. To all the listeners, don't forget, tomorrow night, Monday, we will not be on the air, because we will be with QL Television with Johnny Guzman on, I think it's, QL Television. And we'll get all those links out to everyone tomorrow. It's actually a video, so if you want to see yours truly and Tony yapping on video, there's your opportunity. And I guarantee you the face does not match the voice. But anyway, it really doesn't. But anyway, Jose, thank you so much. If you want to give out your web information, that would be awesome.
Thank you so much. I feel very welcome, and I had a real pleasure here. It was very nice, and just the truth is simple, right? It's obvious and it's self-evident. And at the end of the day, as we were talking, right, like magic and all these things, they're not supernatural in any way, in the way we used to think about it, right? But they're quite real, and they're down to earth, and they're very simple once you understand them. So, if you want to learn a little bit more about my ideas and so on, my website is Jose Mariabarrera, josemariabarrera.com. That's my website, or look for Jose Barrera and Magic and Google that, and you'll find me. So thank you so much, guys, for having me.
Sorry, the pleasure, Jose, is ours. Absolutely. Again, you bring such a warmth and compassion to the forum, and this is what our listeners need to have as well. So, yeah, by all means, don't worry, guys. The chat room's going here. I'll make sure everyone gets a link. I'll put it up on my Facebook, and we'll get it into the chat room where you guys are as well. But Jose, thank you again so much for coming on, and just let Tony or I know when you're available, and we'll get another show booked in, and I'll talk to Santo, and we'll get a nice for-being panel, and let's just go to town on this.
Thanks a lot.
No worries. Tony, any final comments? You've got 30 seconds.
No, that's fine. I'd like to bring people's attention to an article we released tonight, before it's news. Basically, Santos Bonacci's Synchronicity all going critical mass on QLTV tomorrow night. So that'll be awesome. Please check it out. Absolutely.
I'll make sure the Facebook links are out. Again, listeners and family, you're my family. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And don't forget, catch us on QLTV tomorrow night and back on Critical Mass Tuesday. Love to all. Good night. Good night, you guys.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us, Jose. It's wonderful, mate. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. I was quite nervous at the beginning, but this was very nice.
You know what? It takes a bit to get in the groove, and that's, it doesn't take that much. And we do take a lot of pride in having a very kitchen table kind of radio show where, there's no pressure. None at all. We just kind of do our thing and sit around and chat and share truth. And that's what this is all about at the end of the day, yeah?
Okay. Thank you so much, guys.
All right. Love you, Jose. Beautiful job. Thank you so much. And Tony, I'll catch you on the flip side. And again, Jose, just let us know when it's convenient for you, and we'll work something out, get that panel put together, and we'll have some fun. Okay?
Perfect. I would love it. Bye.
All right. Love you guys. Bye.